Discussion has been removed from tonight's agenda basically because of timing concerns and weather concerns, and in order to make sure that as many people who want to be at that meeting can be there. And that has been rescheduled for February 19th, next Wednesday, 7 o'clock here. Thank you. And also thank you all for your flexibility and your willingness to come to this meeting and add things on. It's been such a crazy year for us. I've been on this planning commission for many years, and this has been very different this last year. We've had a lot of work to do, and I just really appreciate everyone's flexibility in getting here to do it. And next week, yeah. We're going to start tonight with the minutes of our two different meetings, January 7th and January 14th. Does anybody have any questions about those meetings? Can I get a motion?
I move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay, first up on our agenda for tonight is 613 West Lancaster Avenue in Wayne. That's Kuz's Bar and Restaurant site. Is the applicant ready?
We're ready.
If you could start us off with just a recap of where we are and what's changed since the time we saw this.
Right. The changes, I think we may have a slide for it too. The one change was that there was a request to increase the rear yard setback to 35 feet, which is code requirement, and that's been performed here as the rear yard setback from that location to this location. Also, you recall that there was a question about widening the aisles, and that has also been widened to 21 feet. It still does not meet code. You may recall that the existing aisle width was less than 20 feet, and what we're proposing is actually 21 feet. We're increasing or decreasing the existing nonconformity, and actually there was a request to widen that last time, which we did. There was also a request regarding providing additional landscape along the north property line. That has been done, and actually the landscape plan has been approved by the Shade Tree Commission.
Any questions from the board? And
there, again, we're going to work with Roger on the stormwater management issues. We did hit rock here, so the applicant's going to need to work with Roger on stormwater management. And you may recall, I believe we removed one of the spaces in the front. There was a request regarding the parallel parking, which is similar to what you really have in the middle of Wayne, or not the parallel parking, but the angled parking in the front where you actually do back out on the Lancaster Avenue, and it goes for along this whole length of parking along this whole distance to the corner to Old Eagle School Road, and we did eliminate one of the spaces. And that's the same as the last plan. And we did show the location of the dumpster.
Do you want to talk to staff first?
Why don't you go ahead?
Nick, I have a couple of quick questions. The zoning table still says the 34.5 feet rear setback. And I'm actually curious, how did you achieve the 35? Are you
I thought it changed.
Taking off a portion of the building?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought it had changed. We had increased it to 35, but actually it's existing nonconformity. We're not increasing the existing nonconformity.
That's right. What the notes had said.
Okay, and that's my fault for saying that it was actually changed to 35.
Yeah, there was a note on one of the little charts that actually thought that was the case. The other thing is, in the early plan, I made comment last month that there seemed to be some lighting spilling onto the residential property, and they were going to take a look at doing something with the light, whether it was a Pico light or some other light, and I just want to hear an update on that.
Good evening, Rob Lambert. In the plan set that was submitted, we're going to remove that Pico light and put in a site light that we'll have a control over, so we can put that house side shield on the back of it if there's any spill.
My only other questions actually had to do with something that I think Roger's going to go over with us about the stormwater and the parking. I'm sorry, the one other question I had, I thought I saw on a chart, I have to look through the paper just a sec. This says that you are proposing 37 spaces and that you're required to give 30. on the chart, on the plan, based on the number of seats, I thought I read, hang on, I got to turn to the page. I thought I read that you need 31 seats and your spaces for the parking, and you're providing 36. So I just wondered which chart is accurate.
Parking center.
Referencing-
31, yes. 30, according to you're right, the chart on sheet 3, it indicates 31 spaces required. We're providing 36 spaces. Is that right, Rob?
Correct.
And you would recall that a lot of the businesses actually use this parking lot. The existing lot has 40 spaces in it. We're actually reducing the number of spaces. And you'll recall from even a couple of the board members last time talked about how they use this parking lot to access some of the businesses here adjacent to this particular business.
And I'm sorry, the parking spaces, I'm even looking at the plan depiction. Can you walk me through that? Because I'm counting 13 in the back, 8 in the middle, that's 21, 6 is 27, 5 is 32, another 5, 1, 2, 3. Oh, that's the 30, it's 5, including that one in the back in the stormwater garden. Is that what's there?
Correct.
So that's where you're getting the 37? Okay, thank you.
9, 12, 17.
That's right, I thought it was 5 plus the 1.
And where's the other 3? 3, oh,
Yeah.
3, 12.
But
yeah.
while we're talking about the parking spaces, I had a question. We talked about landscaping, especially here along Lancaster Pike. That's very important because this is a very large paved area. And I would like to know if you would be willing to remove one more parking space where that little island is. That's a very awkward shape for that island. And it's not enough room, really. On the smaller part where the wedge comes together, that's
Julie,
not...
were you talking this one here?
That's not useful green space. I think ideally if you could take that one parking space out, the diagonal red line cuts across, you'd get a much better, thicker green spot, and even from Lancaster, it would really soften all that paved area.
So you're talking about the space next, where it says 22 in this area. Oh, we can't do an overhead. Remember,
Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't have the over...
I can use the mouse? Got it. You're talking right here, Julia? This
Yes.
space here?
Well, and actually, I'm going to chime back in. So the number shown on the plan is 37, but the chart says 36. There is a discrepancy here.
So if we take that space out and make it green, then you wouldn't have to change that number on your chart.
Let me count. Because actually, that's the, Rob?
I mean, if the numbers...
I think that's the old plan, actually.
Maybe I'm looking at the old plan with the...
Yeah.
The one on the screen is the old plan noting,
Oh,
I'm sorry,
that's one.
noting what was, what we had before and the changes. We actually added an island right in this location. So the plan set that you have in front of you actually shows one there.
There it is, yeah.
Yeah, so you see the island and this one.
At the old plan. Thank you. This is the updated one. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, there you go.
I would like to switch them if we could, I think, or just have 2, because that little, not the triangle, but that other little blob of green space is not going to be useful as green space, as breaking up the pavement. It's too small.
Well, and it's interesting because the parking space that I was kind of wondering about is the one in the middle of the rain garden, which I think is going to be problematic to pull in and out at such a tough angle with the last parking space on that row of 9. She's not. She's talking about a different one.
Yeah, see where the mouse is?
Yeah, right here.
I'd like to see that be green.
Right.
I'm not concerned about the rain garden piece. I think that'll come out okay. So that's my request.
Taking this out and putting it here.
Well, that'd be my second choice.
In exchange, remove the island back here on the last row?
That would be my second choice. I'd rather have both.
Well,
But if you don't want to lose the parking space, I would
I would
request to
say
move.
put the parking space there and put your green spot in the middle.
Yeah, but then they have, whatever, they have a different issue because then there's more than 10 in a row without breaking it up, which is a way.
Yeah, I know, but we're looking at aesthetics here. I think we could let an island back there go to create better aesthetics up front.
All right, well, let's
This is
move.
already all paving along the back here, you know,
Yeah.
currently.
Well, let's get the other issues out. There's probably other things
Okay.
we want to discuss as well. Did any of the board have other questions before we go to staff?
One tiny question. I was looking at the escrow amounts for the golf shed and for this, and for some reason, this is only $5,000 and that's 10. I don't know if there's some basis for that.
That was submitted, but we're not far enough along to finalize the escrows yet.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Roger, we have your memo. Is there anything particular you wanted to point out or you'd like to draw our attention to in that memo?
What I would like to ask is if Rob Lambert could get up and explain the concept of the rain garden in the back corner there,
Okay.
and why it's necessary to do that, and then I can comment after that.
So our initial thought actually was to put in a subsurface basin underneath, approximately where this handicap spot is, all in here would be an underground basin. And so we went out and did permeability tests, and down where this handicap spot is, right in this location here, our first test, we basically found rock right underneath the asphalt. We were able to dig 2 feet before we had refusal of the backhoe, so the backhoe couldn't actually dig any further, so the rock was there. We tested 2 other locations. We tested out front and approximately right in here. And both of those locations also hit, we hit rock refusal at, I think it was 42 and 46 or 48 inches. So very shallow rock in this whole area down here. And so we tried to look at a different concept of how to start to deal with stormwater, and we thought up in this corner we could put in a rain garden. Unfortunately, with the weather, we haven't been able to do more testing to see if the rock was deeper, but thinking that the rock was shallower here, getting deeper, that maybe we would be able to put in a rain garden up in this corner. We would pick up some off-site water to run through it as a water quality measure up in that corner.
But that rain garden really is just, it's because it's the only place, it doesn't really.
Right. It's not as subject to the depth. If we don't get any perks, knowing that we have shallow rock, I'm guessing we probably won't get great perks. And that location there, the rain garden requires a lot less depth to it. Because if you do an underground basin, you have a foot of cover. So you have the existing asphalt, you'll have a foot of cover, then a stone bed, to the bottom of it. So you're getting pretty deep when you get down to the bottom of one of those basins. That's why we picked the rain garden. That's a lot shallower, maybe have some soil mantle underneath it.
And because stormwater is such a critical thing, was there any possibility of discussing with the adjacent property owners who are actually going to use the lot? Is there any part of their lot behind their buildings that could take a detention basin?
Unfortunately, it's basically an alley in the back there. And there's a utilities that run up and down there, so I think it would really preclude putting in that stormwater basin.
And if I can add, the theory behind this rain garden location, one is it's the only location that's open on the site. It'll pick up the building behind that's off the property and take the stormwater from that building, catching it before it goes across. My only concern with that is that there be some sort of a legal agreement drawn up between the 2 parcels at this point. I believe they're currently commonly owned now, but they may not be forever. So I would want some sort of an easement developed on that so that something couldn't be sold off and later and changed.
Yeah, we could agree to something like
And
that.
Roger, you're comfortable with the size of that? It looks very small compared to the impervious surface on this
We
property.
haven't gotten far enough along for all the calculations yet until we get through the permeability testing. So
So
it's,
when they know if it's going to possibly work, then you'll have to do the calculations.
that's correct. It's not in its final form yet, and there's that'll all be, if everyone's okay with the concept of that, that'll be hammered out at the grading permit stage, or before the grading permit stage, actually.
Well, I think my concerns would be, of course, making sure that it works because it looks small, but that will come. And my other concern is it's tucked behind a building. It's surrounded by these parking spaces, and people are driving there. I'm concerned it may be hard to maintain it as not just becoming this sort of leftover space that's doesn't stay green.
It's been pretty common that when rain gardens are used in parking areas, they tend to be in areas like this. I believe, I'm not 100% sure that that parking space that's in the middle of it is going to survive this whole process. But I think it's in an area where it can be maintained.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to draw attention to from your memo?
No, I believe that's it. Do you have anything?
Amy, did you have anything?
I'm sorry. No, there was a letter that was submitted, and we had some responses in our January 29th letter. Did you receive that?
We did.
Okay. Was there anything that you wanted to discuss, or there are some issues that still need to be resolved, but I think that they can be worked out?
Yeah, I think, we're going to be submitting to PennDOT, obviously, for our driveway. We haven't made that submission yet, but we will be submitting to PennDOT. Really, it's an improvement to an existing driveway.
There may not be a permit for that driveway if it predates when PennDOT was requiring permits, so. And if you're modifying it, you would need to make.
No, I understand we're submitting.
Okay.
We're going to be submitting for a permit, but knowing that it's an existing driveway, I don't anticipate that there's going to be too much issue with PennDOT from us improving an existing driveway. We're reducing the number of parking spaces that it services, so it should help us there.
Okay, and I think the only thing that I would probably need some the limited impact study that we had asked for the intersection. It was comment number 1 on the top of page 2 of our review letter. We had initially discussed a limited traffic impact study just for the intersection. I'm concerned with stacking at the intersection and the locations of the driveways. So I'd like to make sure that we don't have any problems with those.
Well, they're both existing driveways. You're asking us to study the intersection of 2 state roads. This is off the top of my head. I think Lancaster Avenue has about 30,000 cars a day. I think Old Eagle School has another 15,000 cars a day, and we're building a parking lot for 36 cars, actually reducing it from 42 to 36 using existing access points. I'm not sure what that study's, the value of that study moving forward. It's going to tell us that there's traffic at that intersection. I think everyone in this room knows that there's traffic at that intersection.
As I mentioned, it may end up giving us some sense of whether there should be less restrictions out of the driveways. I'd like to look at, I'm asking for the study because I'd like to see some reportable crash information for those areas right in the vicinity of your driveways. And I'd like to see what kind of interaction with your lefts will be occurring.
Ultimately, that driveway is under the purview of PennDOT.
But I am asking for it very respectfully. And I'm sure if I talk to PennDOT about this, they would agree with me that this is something that should be considered at this point.
I would defer to PennDOT on the requirement of our driveway there. Looking at the, again, I go back to this is, there is going to be traffic here. We know that. We know that it stacks there. I think that's an obvious, anyone that lives in this area knows that that intersection stacks.
Okay, the comment will be remaining when it goes to the board. Okay.
Well, I'll make an observation. If our staff is asking for that, I think you're probably well advised to get it to them.
Any other board comment?
I have 2 more quick questions.
Go ahead.
One is for Roger. Because I know that they're asking for, I guess, basically final plan approval tonight? Is that right? Oh, Peter.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't catch that until earlier tonight, but this is a land development, so they're required to go through preliminary and final.
Okay, so
it's not a minor subdivision, although the language is extremely confusing and poorly written.
Okay.
So,
It's land development.
But it is a land development.
Okay.
It needs to go through both. They can certainly ask for a waiver to that particular section, which I think they have. So really the question before you is whether or not you would recommend the granting of that waiver.
Okay. Well, then this part gets to my question for Roger. So practically speaking, as you get further information about that rain garden, what happens if it's not sufficient to meet the code that you're asking it to meet? That's one question. And then the other question I have is, I read that the maximum cart driveway entrance should be 25 feet, and this is showing 28. Do they need a waiver, or is that a pre-existing condition? And that's under
I think it's
250.
maximum or minimum?
It says, "The width of the entrance and exit drive shall be a maximum of 25 feet at the street line and 35 feet at the, 35 feet at the curb line." Which one are you showing here, 28 or the curb line or the street line here? Well, the street line is a limit of 25 feet. That's why I'm wondering about the 28. Is that street line or curb line?
We've actually reduced that. That's another kind of reduction. Right now, it's actually wider right there. So we're trying to actually reduce it and consolidate the width there to organize the driveway.
Okay, but would that still need a saldo waiver? Maybe Peter or Roger could weigh in on that one?
What section are you looking at? Let me look that up quickly here. I don't have that off the top of my...
255, 29, A, 12, C. I remember this from Rite Aid. That's why it really rang a bell for me, is that there was a lot of conversation about the entrance and exit drive at the Rite Aid development down on Lancaster.
The reason for that because of pedestrian crossing? Is that why it's maximum?
I think also to keep the speeds down.
Yeah.
Reduce it from 28?
So my understanding is that even if it's an existing condition in a land development, they would still either need to meet it or ask for a waiver, right?
If I could address it, it's Sean McCloskey from Penn Real Estate Group. I'd like to address this driveway width issue with you if I could. If you look at this aerial, you'll see that this is essentially this current driveway is essentially uncontrolled from the perspective of traffic access today. So it's a little difficult to see here, but I'm trying to use the cursor to show you where this existing tree is at the end of the parking spot on Route 30. Do you see the triangular island on Route 30 near the entrance? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're actually taking out that triangle, and we're taking out the next parking space to the west that's on Route 30 in order to create an island that protects the remaining angled parking spaces that are on 30. And if you look carefully at that, the current intersection today, you'll see there's a sidewalk that extends in, all the way from the corner where the karate studio was, all the way to the old bar, Couz's, and all the way to the side. And that sidewalk does not line up with the sidewalk that is in front of the Bertucci's and the spa. So the intent of the new site plan, which I can scroll to in a moment, is to create a smooth sidewalk transition through that area, eliminate that painted triangle, eliminate one of the parking spaces on Route 30 to cause the existing driveway to line up on both the right and left and make safe pedestrian access. So we thought very carefully, and currently it's uncontrolled, and I would say the width is 40 plus feet in there. So there's a reduction in this case proposed at 28, and the question is, where did the 28-foot design width come from? So there used to be, once upon a time, two driveways serving the adjoining property. There was one serving where the Curry Spa is, and there was one serving where Bertucci's is. And with that redevelopment years ago, they were consolidated to a single driveway, which exists in the middle of that of the two lots there, serving both Bertucci's and Curry. Now, I would suggest that if anyone has experience with that driveway, they would feel that that entrance is a little tight for vehicular movement. At least that's my assessment of it. And that is 25 feet of width. That's designed at the code required or code mandated minimum of 25. We don't think it's enough, particularly for cars coming off of Route 30 that may be traveling at speed. There just needs to be a little bit more maneuvering room than the 25. So we've proposed 28 because we think it's safe. It's reduced from the 40 feet and not a line that's out there. Now, I'd also like to come back to, sort of the overall concept of this plan. This plan has less square footage than currently exists on that property today. We are proposing fewer parking spaces, reduced impervious cover, and more green space. So with respect to the green space that you have you've brought up, we'd be happy to take out one of the parking spots either in the corner at the rain garden or increase the island in the middle which would, further reduce the impervious on the site and increase the green. We just would like to get to the point where we may need a dozen waivers. We'd like the Planning Commission to recommend all the waivers that may be required to execute this plan. This plan, we think, is quite favorable for the town. There's many, many benefits from this. And as I pointed out at the last hearing, the only way we can really justify this site is because we're involved in the sites next door. It's a very uneconomic development. A lot of capital is being spent to improve this property. It's the minimum amount of development we can put there to gain the maximum amount of increased utility for the adjoining properties, which include properties that we own and also includes properties that we don't own. So we would ask a very favorable and liberal interpretation of the code and whatever waivers that may in fact be required.
Okay, let's go ahead. We're still waiting for an answer to your question, but are you guys ready? Do you have an answer for Susan?
I can answer the driveway width question. The PennDOT minimum standard is 28 feet, so they're probably going to require that
that's
anyway,
not gonna be a
and I
problem.
would defer to PennDOT on that width.
And the notion of I'm more curious than anything, what happens if we were to waive these plans, what happens if that rain garden doesn't meet what you need it to meet? How does that?
Well, again, it'll be reviewed at the grading permit stage, and Rob, if you want to opine on how big this thing is going to be and how well it's going to work.
What actually happens is, and it happens on residential properties all the time, where perk tests don't work. High groundwater table, high rock, lots of different reasons why stormwater won't work. And the township has approved in the past plans, and I believe your code gives the township engineer that leeway to approve a plan which doesn't necessarily meet the letter of what the code says based on what is feasible. We can't do it if it's not feasible, and what we can do is, get as close to that as possible, and that's what we'll do. And I think, I don't have the section of the code in front of me, but there's a section of the code that basically defers to the township engineer.
Thank you. Okay.
And you can make that any condition of your recommendation as to how.
But isn't it automatically a condition?
Yes. I mean, they still have to meet, like I said, at the grading permit stage, they still have to conform to the ordinance or come as close as possible at what is practical to the ordinance.
Right. So as long as we're comfortable with this method on this property, that's our concern, and you'll make it work.
Yes.
Okay. Let me take public.
Just a quick question. So, Roger, if you found that they needed a larger area, then you would just recommend removing those 3 nearest parking spots, since they don't need them anyhow, I would imagine.
I don't want to assign a number to the number of parking places I would ask them to remove, but I'm
saying that's an option, is removing some of the since they're not required more than 30.
Yes. I can tell you that I think that one parking space in the middle of it there is probably going to go away.
Before you would allow them not to meet the standards, you would look to enlarge the area.
Do what we can to meet the ordinance, yes.
Okay. Can we go to public comment? Is there any public comment on this application? Thank you.
Actually, I had a comment.
Go ahead.
I had originally suggested that they remove the island and the back row of parking. I changed my mind on that. I think you ought to keep that there and possibly remove the one that is in the middle of where the little rain garden would be, because I think they're going to need it. And I'm wondering, does the township have any rules or inspections or policies as to the maintenance of a rain garden and who inspects it?
Yes, I believe the township has the ability to go on and inspect any of the rain gardens. There is, during the grading permit process, any structure, any drainage structure that's located on a private property, there'll be an easement granted by that property owner, or an agreement that allows the township to come on and inspect that at any time.
But does anybody on a regular basis, like every year, 2 years, 3 years, go around and actually take a look at these basins and rain gardens and things like that, green roofs?
My guess is probably not, unless they're notified of an apparent problem. That would fall under Mr. Norsini's department, but I believe it probably, it would take a lot of manpower to do that constantly.
But I think if we're allowing these in the code, And if we don't have something set up now, maybe we should be looking at something to do it, because I think this type of thing, since it grows, it can also die and or be filled in, and you wouldn't know it, and then you don't have the water controls. So I think if you're doing something that is creative like this, we need to have some sort of an inspection policy going forward with it.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the applicant is required to sign a stormwater management easement agreement. And I believe, and I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't know if Peter knows off the top of his head, if there's a requirement of yearly inspections by the applicant to give to the township. And I'm not positive of that, Peter.
Not off the top of my head, but hopefully I'll have an answer in a couple minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, there are requirements that the applicant needs to inspect and maintain the system. I just don't have an answer of how regularly
Right.
township personnel goes out and performs
Well,
that inspection.
my concern is there is a lot of zoning code requirements, and they aren't always followed. And unless a neighbor complains vociferously, it doesn't always get followed up by the township. And I know I'm not criticizing you, Kevin. I know you're busy writing the ordinances that we're currently working on and so forth. But if we're going to allow these types of things, I think we really need to look at some formal form of inspection, just spot checking now and then, make sure it's working.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, from a zoning complaint, we investigate all complaints that come across. When we have the staff to do that, we don't go out looking for issues from a zoning standpoint. It may not be the day or the week, but we do get out and verify all zoning complaints, all property maintenance complaints. I don't know if there is a formal inspection program for stormwater management basins. I can say that in the more visible commercial areas, that those tend to be looked at a little bit closer because they are so visible. The one at Chili's we do look at quite often. We're in and out, whether it's for lunch or whatnot. The restaurants tend to get a little bit more visibility from township staff standpoint as we're going out. Whether we're doing regular inspections or not, those are things that we all look at, and if we see issues, then we notify the respective departments for those.
And I think I would add green roofs to that also. It's just a comment. It doesn't necessarily,
and to build on what
plan.
Kevin's saying, and this actually isn't a zoning issue. There's a stormwater management ordinance and the Saldo ordinance that dictate this.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question along, Roger, I guess it's for you. I'm looking at the drawing of sheet 3 of 7, and from the elevation lines, am I correct that this lot or plot, this part of the area, the parking lot, would have to be regraded so that the water would flow to the...
I don't actually have that sheet in front of me.
But I guess you don't, I guess my question is, if it doesn't, it would have to be regraded so that
I think the applicant can answer that question better than me right now.
Yeah, I believe what you're referring to the rain garden area?
Yes.
The rain garden area is actually going to take off-site. It's ironically at the high spot of our site, so the site will not, the parking lot will not be regraded to this, but it's basically taking a off-site area and running it through that stormwater basin. So water that would just run through our property, we're picking that up.
Could somebody give me a little explanation about the easement that's required? It's on your report, Roger, item 6 on the last page. It says an easement is required for the construction of the parking island. Easement from who?
If you look at the island that he's actually pointing the cursor to right now, that is partially off of the parcel that's being developed. So what I'm asking is that an easement be granted. And again, currently I believe the parcels, both sides are owned by the common ownership now. What I want to ensure is that one or both aren't sold off and then one of the neighbors comes out and removes that island. So I want that island to stay, and I want that to be an easement that allows it to cross onto the other parcel.
Okay, and then maybe I don't read this correctly, but under
Like you said.
general comments for first sentence, or first item under Roman numeral 4, it says about sewage facilities planning, and then it says a planning module exemption form will be completed. Why is that? Why is there an exemption? I don't know.
That's the name of a form that is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. So It's a process that's done on every land development plan where they fill out a form, they send it to the DEP. The DEP sends it back saying whether it's eligible for an exemption from planning or they have to produce a full-blown planning module.
I got it. Thanks.
Anybody have anything else?
Yes. I notice against the Curry building, and again, crossing the property line, there's a huge striped area of asphalt paving. And we've been talking about how some of the green space doesn't work as well and the view from Lancaster and everything else. Would there be any possibility of converting that to green space? Some or all of it?
We looked at that quite carefully, and I certainly understand why you would see it. We've striped it out as an island. But the issue here is that there's quite a number of turning movements that are occurring at that intersection. So you have entering vehicles from Route 30 that may proceed straight, right, or left, as well as traffic coming from the east from both the Spa and Bertucci's. And it's fairly, it's fairly important to have the turning movements there. So the space is a little larger than normal, but if you look at it, it's a 90-degree intersection. We're trying to account for the turning movements that would have to go sort of around that island that we're talking about enhancing the size of.
Well, I'm just wondering if some portion of it, not all of it necessarily, could be green, additional green, especially, let's say, if that little thing in the middle that perhaps can't be used anymore. If we could flip some of the green, a bigger area of green next to the spot labeled 6, I guess.
Right. No, I certainly see your point. I would just note, if you could, that we're taking.
Can I ask for clarification, say, because I'm confused? What island, that cross-hatching, are you talking about? The one up on Lancaster, or one along the building?
Along the Curry building, there's
that one.
And then
Okay.
it stretches across the property line
Right.
besides.
Okay, and that's the one you were addressing before?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I would like to point out that right in that immediate vicinity, if you see this green strip here behind the Curry building, on the west side of the building, that's of course all paved today. This lot's all 100% paved today. And we were taking this 3-foot section out behind it to create some additional green space behind it. And that's tying into the area where the rain garden would go. And if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly from the township engineer, it looks like this parking space is going to fall to additional rain garden space as well. So we're talking about additional green space here as well as here. This island, which we will commit to tonight, to increasing the size of in green, as well as the one we added between last hearing and this one. And I'd just like to point out additional green space we're adding in front of the building here, taking out some of the sidewalk to create a green space in front, as well as this entire green area that we're creating in order to enhance the pedestrian safety movements and the true interconnection of these lots, so you can have an adequate pedestrian walkway as well as a safe intersection at 30. So this one we are frankly just a little concerned about, that if we wind up curbing it off today for additional green space, and it turns out that we need it for truck or other vehicle maneuvering, we might really wind up with a sort of a hazard. So we're taking every spot where we're confident we can put in green space and putting it in. This one we're not confident is going to work the way we would like it to.
How do you anticipate the delivery trucks to the building to come in and out of the site? Because if you're concerned about that, then I would also be concerned about the green space across from there. Because if your deliveries are occurring at the rear of the building, it's going to be difficult for trucks to come in off Lancaster, make that hard turn without hitting any vehicles that are parked on site, and make it over to the back of there.
We don't disagree with the fact that this is not an ideal site plan. The question is, can we improve it from the existing conditions that we have today? So I would point out that when you come in, this entrance drive, as we talked about, the throat here is 28 feet wide. That's actually wider in this vicinity before you get to that island, and it's 22 feet at the narrowest point. Keep in mind it's striped here, and then it's actually wider again as you make this left-hand radius around. The distance between the spot that's likely to go at the rain garden and the edge of that island is in fact larger than the 22, and then it tapers to 21, which is bigger than existing. So
I'm wondering if you might be able to get rid of the teardrop area that you're looking at right there, because I think that might improve the ability for trucks to make that maneuver around that corner. Since you're eliminating that parking space anyway, I know that we're looking for more green space on site, but I think that it might help out with your truck movements internally, and it's not really affecting your parking.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's just...
No, I think that's a very good suggestion. So if this parking space, the one the cursor's on, were to be eliminated, and this green island here reconfigured to enhance the turning movement, it may be possible to simultaneously improve the turning movement and increase the green space. If that's a suggestion, we could do that.
You may want to look at, Roger just pointed out, that you may want to look at curving that area so that it allows the trucks to turn on a clean curve rather than doing a tight corner for that.
Here,
Correct.
yes.
Okay.
I think that's doable.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Okay, anything else? Okay, somebody want to make a motion?
Just one comment from my office. Are we going to, do you have, or are you going to provide easements for where the parking lot crosses over into neighboring properties up on the most, upper left-hand corner next to the spa, and also down where the angled parking is in front along Lancaster Avenue?
Is the question about the easements for this island and the rain garden between these two properties?
No,
this
actually,
bottom
I'm
here?
talking about cross easements for traffic.
Okay,
So right there by the spa, up the back alley, and also cross easements for the parking spots that angle across the property lines.
Okay, so in terms of access, there are existing cross-access easements between the 4 properties to the west of this, so between Sugartown Road, or Old Eagle School Road, actually, and this western lot line. Those 4 buildings plus this one already have existing cross-access.
Okay, if you can provide those to the township.
Yes.
And to my office so we can see
Sure.
that. And that's what we've been told. I'm also concerned, we were talking about where that cross-hatching is in front of the spa. Are you going to provide a cross easement there between your 2 properties?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay. And then lastly, we have parking spots that go between your property and the neighboring properties to the left or to the west, up in front. I think we would like to see that, right there, some sort of easement there. Obviously, you can't force the neighboring property owners to provide it to you, but we would like you to provide it to the neighboring property owners so that in the future they don't lose their parking spaces because there's some fight between property owners.
Would it be easier to have that as a condition of a site plan? Because this area exists as in part of the PennDOT right-of-way. But we could certainly agree as a condition of when we get to that stage, a site plan approval, that we not modify it in any way that would reduce parking available for the adjoining neighbors.
Yeah, I think that's fine. I just want, it's a minor matter, but I want to have something in place to try to, keep those spots available.
We're in
Can I-
agreement, they're needed.
Yeah, can I recommend that we hold off on making any formal decisions on that until we've been before PennDOT? And I'd really like to encourage you to get this plan in front of PennDOT, because the access right here and the throat length on it is very short. And while the township is willing to accept that, I don't know if PennDOT is going to have some say on that matter. I understand it's an existing condition, but I don't know if they're going to want to have some improvements there or make some changes there. So I'd hate for us to move forward without having PennDOT have at least some kind of a look at it.
Right, so you've requested in the review letter, and I believe we've agreed to have you at any meetings with PennDOT, and we know those meetings are coming, so to the extent that that would help resolve the matters, perfectly fine.
Right, and I'm just saying that I don't know if PennDOT's going to ask for some changes to that on-street parking right in that location. I don't know. So I think before we start drafting any language or anything for those areas, let's get this in front of PennDOT and see if they have anything that they would like added to it or to have any discussion on it. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, so to the extent that if we could, since we're in the middle of a land development plan, to the extent that we could get a favorable recommendation with the necessary waivers from Planning Commission, and as we move forward on the land development plans, concurrently do the meetings with PennDOT, that would be fine.
Peter, is that how it works?
Yeah, that would be fine.
That would be all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now can I get a motion?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can make a motion that would, that we could work on. So I would move that we would approve the, that the plans be revised to address the comments that are in Roger's report of January the 30th, 2014. And that, in addition,
And Amy, too.
Hang on, hi, John, can I
Okay,
give
go
it a
ahead.
shot? I'm going to move that we recommend approval of this land development plan as a final plan, and that we recommend approval of the necessary waivers necessary for this plan, on the condition that, 1, the applicant submits the traffic information that our traffic engineer has requested, that 2, the parking space near the rain garden area is removed, that 3, remove the 1 parking space from the central aisle near the proposed green space, and 4, to ensure that the cross easements for traffic are submitted for areas where that's necessary, and that the applicant meets, it satisfies both the comments, the general comments of both the township engineer and the township traffic engineer.
Make a comment to that?
Wait,
May I just chime in on 2 aspects of that proposal?
please.
First off, I think it's the consultant's recommendations that the waiver to the preliminary plan not be granted or not recommended to be granted, and that this, if you do want to recommend approval, that it's for preliminary plan approval, not final.
Okay.
Secondly, that being said, I think for the applicant's stead, you need to make a recommendation on these the waiver requests as laid out in Roger's letter to all these various aspects of saldo, especially with the parking lot configuration.
I mean, we need to go through them one by one. We can't just say all the waiver requests.
I would. You can say if you want to recommend granting all the requested waivers, you can do it that way. Yeah, it's perfectly appropriate, but I think you need to specifically say we do recommend granting those waivers.
Okay.
And then I do have the question, I appreciate the comment about PennDOT and Roger's comment, but that waiver needs to be added to this because our cartway says a maximum of 25. So would they need that additional waiver?
Yeah, they have to comply with our saldo, even if there's a conflict with PennDOT or ask for a waiver. Arguably, since this is a PennDOT road and PennDOT's regs are different than ours, we kind of are obligated to give it to them, but they still have to ask.
Sure, right. So you need to add that to the waivers, the 25-foot relief on the maximum.
I'm fine with that, but I don't think I could write that down.
So we're going to say that we're recommending preliminary approval
Yes.
with the waivers requested, and in addition, the waiver for the 25-foot.
A waiver for the additional for the driveway width.
Yes.
Yes.
And the changes that I thought that were being made was we were taking away the parking spot in the center, not the one at the rain garden. Isn't that the one that?
After talking to Roger, I think we're taking away the one in the rain garden also.
I thought we were waiting
I
to
think
see
both.
what their
I think both.
design.
I think it's
I
both.
think we need to both now. Do you have a feeling
Did you
about-
include that one when you said it the
I
first
did.
time? Oh, okay, all right. So that one I wanted to be noted. But I'm not so sure that I want to bundle in the traffic part. Can we do that separately?
Well,
Because I'd rather leave it up to the Board of Commissioners whether they want to require the traffic study, because it is an existing condition and it is an expense that may really not result in any changes. So I don't want to weigh in on that one particularly. If we could take that one out, then everything else I'm good with. Do you understand what?
And
Amy, does that work
actually,
for you?
I agree with you, too.
If that
So
goes
if
to
we
the
could just
commission?
leave that separate,
That's fine.
because I don't want
a good point.
to make or break the deal.
Miley, I have one other comment.
Go ahead.
We were talking about not just taking that one parking space away from the green space in the middle, but reconfiguring that so that the trucks could get around it. Do we need to spell that out in the motion?
We can. We can, certainly. Okay, should I try again? Okay. I move that we recommend approval of this land development as a preliminary plan, and that we recommend approval of the necessary waivers as outlined in our township engineer's memo, and that additionally, we recommend the approval of an additional waiver concerning the driveway width, and that, provided that the parking space in the rain garden is removed, the parking space near the center of in the center aisle near the proposed green space is removed and shaped so that trucks will have better turning radius at that location. Are we adding the cross easements? Is that all right? Do we put the cross easements in?
Pardon?
You want the cross easements in?
Yeah, that they provide cross easements between this property and the spa property to the east.
That we provide cross easements between this property and the spa property to the east, and that
There's two additional easements, Julia. There's the easement of the green space on Lancaster Pike.
and the easement on the green space on Lancaster Pike.
That's in Roger's letter.
Okay, and then Roger, do you have it in the letter, the easement you wanted for the source of the water for the rain garden?
No, that's not in my letter, so you could add that.
That's an easement for the property that the water will be running onto the rain garden. That was something that he mentioned early on,
Okay,
that the source of the water in the rain garden
I
is
didn't know that
actually
needed
the
an
Curry
easement.
property.
okay.
Well, so that somebody doesn't come along and close off those, they have to maintain that source of water into the rain garden.
Okay. So that
And
would
that-
be, and also the easement for the water flowing into the rain garden from the adjacent property.
And that we defer to the board, maybe this is the wording for the rest of it, that we defer to the Board of Commissioners regarding the traffic engineer's comments requesting a traffic study, traffic impact study, a limited traffic impact study, is that your wording? That we defer to the Board of Commissioners with regard, and the traffic engineer with regard to that decision.
Well done.
I second that.
All in favor?
Hold on.
Sorry.
Sorry.
In your recounting of the motion, I think you left off the condition that they comply with all Roger's comments in his letter.
And that they comply with all of Roger's comments from his letter. I'm not going to. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
It really, and it's actually going to be.
Okay, the next thing on our agenda for tonight is Overbrook Golf Club. And if I'm correct, the applicant is requesting two things. One is an appeal to remove vegetation.
Julie, there are two separate agenda
There's
items
two
related to this
requests.
property. You've seen this before, previously, as zoning hearing board.
Mm-hmm.
There were some issues with the method in which the engineer had calculated steep slopes. The area of disturbance has not changed. The area of improvements has not changed. Only the method at which they had calculated steep slopes caused them to go back and take a look at it, which increased the area amount of disturbance of steep slopes. Although I need to repeat again that they're not increasing the disturbance area. It's just the amount of steep slopes within that area has increased, so the disturbances. So as a result of that, we had to re-advertise for zoning hearing board. because we're not comfortable there's a significant difference in the numbers, and we had advertised for a specific number of area of steep slopes to be disturbed. So we re-advertised, and as a result of that, I wanted them to come back in front of you again for another recommendation, since it's going back in front of the zoning hearing board under not a new application but an amended application. So,
But weren't they also asking for something else? Weren't they asking for us to not require?
well, that was the first part of it. Is the first reason why they're here. The second part is that they are then asking for a waiver of the land development process, and in essence for the process to go through the normal grading permit application, which it would need to do, and that then any of those issues would then be worked out at that, given the limited scope of the improvements that are proposed.
So if we talk about the second issue first, and if we so decide that they do not, that they can go straight to the grading plan and not have the land development, then do we need to discuss the first issue?
Yes, the steep slopes is a zoning issue.
That's a zoning issue.
That
Okay.
has to occur regardless of land development or not.
right.
Again, what you'll see is no different than what you saw before. It's just that there'll be more areas of steep slopes shown within the limits of disturbance. But Fred, if I understand correctly, the limits of disturbance have not changed on the site.
All right, well, can we start with that? Can you just, if the applicant could take us through that part of it?
Yes. Good evening. Fred Fromhold. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of Overbrook Golf Club. With me, of course, is Dave Fiorello from Momini and Associates, the golf club civil engineer, and also Ted Moser, who is a member and member of the board building committee that is responsible for this particular project. And just by way of a real quick recap, we were here before you in early December, I think December 3rd. We were scheduled to appear and did appear before the zoning hearing board. As Kevin said to you, there was a question that came up regarding our plan, the area that was shown on the plan. I think the board wanted to see an area beyond the actual disturbed area. We have submitted an amended application that shows a good 200 feet beyond the area of slopes that are being affected by this. And Kevin also mentioned there was a question as to how the slopes that were disturbed were calculated. No more disturbance to those slopes in order to build the cart barn, but there was a question as to how you calculate those slopes. So the slope area increased when recalculated, but the very same disturbance that you had seen back in early December.
So the plan hasn't changed?
The plan hasn't changed
and
at all.
And the amount of disturbance hasn't changed? But the calculations have changed for...
Correct.
Okay, do we really need to hear this?
So that was number one, and Dave Fiorello can show you, again, where the barn is. It is in the area where the carts are now stored, and the need for this building is that the club is converting from gas carts to electric carts, and they must be within an enclosed building, and there will be...
We really liked it
Yeah.
the first time we saw it. If you could just tell us what the differences were in those numbers.
Okay.
That's what we wanted to discuss.
The difference in terms of calculated slopes went from 560 to 1,425 square feet of slopes that were affected. That is the number for which we will be seeking approval from the zoning hearing board. Of course, we have a 130-acre property that these slopes are central to. So that's what we're looking for by way of recommendation to the zoning hearing board. Since then, and on January 21st, we filed a land development application, and there are 8 sheets in the land development plans that have been submitted, all of the plans that are required for a typical land development submission. And what we are requesting from this Planning Commission is a recommendation to the full board that the land development process be waived so that there can be an expedited consideration of this matter, and also the grading permit that would be issued to allow the cart barn to be constructed. Our justification for that, so that you understand that, is that we're talking about the area where the carts are now stored. It's an existing bituminous area. It is 450 feet away from the closest location that is off the site. That's on Godfrey Road. The whole barn is designed to be nestled into the existing hillside, and for those reasons, and no traffic impacts either off-site or on-site in terms of circulation.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me just check, is there any public comment for this application? Thank you.
This
Did
is
you
in
have,
fact-
Roger, did you have any comments about the new calculations? Are you comfortable?
I haven't seen them. That was a part of the zoning application.
The reason for the recalculations is when we looked at the area of disturbance, we were looking at calculating the steep slopes as contours more than 3 in a row. Other municipalities have done that. We have done that. And in doing so, we realized that Radnor does not use that same delineation. So we went back and we looked at all the disturbance between all the contours and not just any contours that are 3 bands or more. So in doing so, our calculations of that area increased because we're not counting previously we're not counting the 1 little bands of contour or 2 bands of contours, which we were required to do now. And in doing so, just adding that additional area brought the numbers up.
And is there any staff comment on either that process or the results of their changed figures?
No, it was something that came up at the zoning hearing board as a result of another issue related to steep slopes in the application, what the zoning hearing board was looking for. In the end, the scope of the project has not changed. It hasn't increased from what you previously saw. I'm supportive of it. I think it's just a nuance of the code. If they were expanding the area, increasing the amount of disturbance outside of the limits of what you saw before, I may have a different opinion, but it's not the project isn't changing. So from that standpoint, I don't have any issues with it.
And so we're looking, on this part of the application, we're looking for a recommendation to zoning. I mean, they would be looking for us to make a recommendation to zoning. What would the wording be?
That I believe similarly that you recommended that the zoning hearing board grant the variance to steep slope disturbance. I believe is what the motion was previously. I don't recall if you submitted a formal recommendation or not to the zoning hearing board, but it would be along
Would
those
anyone
lines.
like to make a motion like that?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. The second issue is the foregoing the preliminary and final land development plans and letting this be handled during, what would it go to then? It would go the grading and stormwater?
It would be the grading permit process, at which point they would submit a grading permit that would be reviewed by myself, that would ensure that it meets the stormwater ordinance and the grading ordinance of the township.
Okay, let me just check. Is there any public comment on this concept? Thank you.
I have one question that kind of relates to both of those. Why is there 2 different addresses? One is 799, the other is 801 Godfrey Road?
Are you moving?
Is that a mistake or?
It has to be a mistake, we're 799.
Okay.
I think
so-
our system, Kathy, indicates that it's 801. I don't think it's a big issue. It's a very large frontage of property along Godfrey.
Okay.
So I think it's just a system issue, what we have in
Should
our
we maybe
system.
make note of that it's referring to that 799 so they don't have to come back yet another time?
And the application says
because of that?
806, so.
Okay. Well, can we combine them all, also known as 799, 806, or 801, or whichever one you have?
We will try to get a single address
Okay.
for this.
Thank you. Any comments or questions?
I have 2, one question, one comment. So I'm seeing that the driveways basically are going to go through the steep slopes, the access, is that basically?
That
what's
is
gonna-
correct,
Okay.
yes.
And will they actually be pretty steep?
We had looked originally.
It may not.
We had looked originally at bringing the driveways into the side of the building. And in doing so, we had created the need for retaining walls and additional steep slope disturbance. So we modified our plans, and this was done before we had come in before the last time, to come in the back to minimize that slope. We have a slope coming a grade here of roughly 10%. The intent is to have this as the access uphill to bring the golf carts up to the facility, so you don't have the steep straight run down slope. The other rise as we're coming up the other side is on the order of 7-8%.
Okay. So given that this is not going to, depending on how we vote, it's not going to come back to us or be any kind of a thing other than grading, I have one comment and one request. If you think it's likely people are going to walk up and down those hills, that consider putting in some kind of railing if those are going to be pretty steep. I know it's really hilly there.
Perhaps Ted can...
You don't have to answer it. I'm just saying consider it.
Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
please, the mic.
Yeah. It's fine. You don't have to really, it was more of a comment, but now you can come up because now's the part I really do want you to, I'm going to put you on the spot.
The one side, the steepest side, is going to be an exit, and it's only going to be bringing the carts up. The other side that we've lowered the grade on is going to be where the work is done on the carts, the cleaning, and
Okay.
that area.
All right. Now, don't go away. You have the great fortune that I live across the street from the bottom of the retention basin. I live on the little cul-de-sac across from the retention basin. And I drive up and down Godfrey many times a day. There's a lot of water coming off of the bottom of your property, an increase in the 10 years, 15 years I've lived on my road. There's an increase in the amount of water coming off of your property across Darby Paoli Road onto Lawrence Lane. So you guys haven't had an application in the time I've been on the Planning Commission, so I've never really had the opportunity to say, please take a look at, there's something you can do to...
We will.
Thank you. Particularly right near the water pump station you were working on last year. And the other thing is you've got a lot of water pours off of your driveway onto Godfrey. And if there's something you guys can look at to address that, and you also have a lot of dirt and silt that comes off that has clogged the two storm pipes that are on Godfrey Road, and Public Works knows about that because it's a state road, so it's hard to get PennDOT out to take care of those. But it all creates water running down Godfrey that impacts Lawrence Lane. So
I'll have them take a look at it.
thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Other comments from the board or discussion? How do you all feel about foregoing preliminary and final land development for this and just accepting what we've seen and passing it on to the grading stages?
Since all that's really going to occur is grading and stormwater, I think that's fine.
Anyone have a concern? Then can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion. I'm supportive of it, that we grant the waiver of the...
How do we word the motion?
That we grant the waiver of the land development phase.
Yeah,
We
correct.
recommend granting the waiver of the land development process.
My one request is noted in Roger's letter, conditioned, as you're aware, we did have the recreation land ordinance that we had passed, that they comply with that specific provision is not waived. They would have the opportunity to either provide the required recreation land or a fee in lieu of if they so chose to.
Okay. So I would make the recommendation that we grant the waiver for the land development process, subject to meeting all the requirements listed on the staff's letter, and specifically not waiving the recreation and land fee requirement.
That was an excellent motion, Susan.
If I may address that just a moment on the recreation fee, just so that you don't have a misunderstanding of what our position is
Please.
on that. I believe when you look at the recreation ordinance, the idea is that there would be recreation facilities that would be provided for people who come into a development. There are two ways the ordinance looks at development. One is for residential units. When you have a larger subdivision, the code envisions that there will either be creation of recreational facilities of certain size for the residents in that development, or in lieu of that, if there is not the room or desire to create those facilities within the development, that a fee be paid in lieu. For a commercial development, for a non-residential development, the way the code reads, there is a comparable requirement that a certain amount of facilities that would be on the developed property be made available for the recreational use of that development, or alternatively, a fee in lieu be paid. What's interesting here is that we are not, and the fee in lieu is based on the footprint of the building, but most non-residential developments, you have a building that has some utilitarian purpose. Here, we're really talking about a covered area for existing golf carts that are on the property. And interestingly, we have a 130-acre property that is dedicated to the recreational use of those people who are using that facility. I think there is a question here as to how the ordinance ought to be applied in this instance. And what we'd like to do is to be able to have that further conversation as to whether a fee in lieu is really appropriate in this particular situation for this particular development. So I understand Mr. Phillips raising this as an issue and bringing it to your attention under the code. But if we have the understanding going forward that there may be a couple of ways to satisfy this, and one of them would be by the commissioners looking at, and by you also, looking at our particular property as a recreational facility, a facility where 130 acres more or less are dedicated to the recreational purposes of the people who are using this facility. We don't want to take out the 18th hole and put it back in satisfaction of the recreational requirement, but if you can understand where we're coming from on that, the question as to whether there should be a $6,000, $7,000 recreation fee paid in this particular instance, we would like to have further conversation with staff and with the commissioners on that. And we're happy to have further conversation with you on it.
I'm thinking that's an issue for the commissioners. What do you all think?
Well, I think we worked on this ordinance, and it covers redevelopment. Mm-hmm. This is a redevelopment from a parking lot to a structure. The intent is to have the fee or the space, additional space. And it's a private club, so it's not really township-wide.
Right, but and I understand that, but if you look at the ordinance doesn't require that any of these recreation facilities be made available for public use. They can be, but they don't have to be. And the recreational facilities, it says, allow for the orderly acquisition and development of park or recreation areas needed to serve new residents, okay? And then it talks about the access to the recreation area. It says by a public road or a road which the residents of the development in which the site is located can use to reach the park or recreation site and recreation site. So I think that when you look at this code provision, there is not a requirement that the public have access to the recreational facilities. So for that reason, in looking at the developer of this property, we have our entire site that's dedicated to recreational facilities. And for that reason, we would prefer if this could be looked at as we will continue to make this entire property available for recreational purposes, which is indeed the proposal.
We had this conversation, I remember we had a long conversation about with businesses, because we kind of wondered, well, you know, what impact are they really having? In subdivisions, it's bringing more people in, and so they should do the fee or provide the recreational space. And I remember the argument we had about the commercial developments is that there is an argument to be made that by redevelopment of commercial, it could increase the traffic, the people coming to our township because of an increased business activity or something like that, and that this was a way for commercial developments, and you're not exactly commercial, but you're non-residential, right, to participate in continuing to underwrite the cost that the township bears for having people travel to your club. And there's just as strong an argument that could be made, and you should make it to the Board of Commissioners. Right, I agree with Ms. Hurl. Right. But there's just as strong an argument to be made that you might have more members now coming to your club, members who aren't Radnor Township taxpayers, and that places a strain on our community in some way, and this fee helps to offset those types of things for us. But I would strongly just tell you, it's go talk to the Board of Commissioners.
Yeah.
That was the conversation we had at the time about it.
Anybody else? You want?
Does that need to be part of the motion?
I specifically said we're not waiving that. The board, and he should present it to the Board of Commissioners.
Instead of saying that we're saying not to waive it, we'll leave it to the discretion of the Board of Commissioners how to handle the application in this case for that.
I mean, that was my motion. It'll either get seconded or it won't. That was my motion. We haven't even seconded the motion yet.
Okay, could you just say the
I guess
motion again?
I guess I'm a little
That we would waive
confused.
the preliminary land development process, subject to the applicant needing the staff comments, and we specifically do not waive the land and recreation fee.
We do not recommend.
We do not recommend waiving of the fee.
One quick comment, Susan, you mentioned waiving the preliminary land development. It would be the total land development.
Waiving the land development. In the first one, I think I got it right.
Okay. Okay.
So wait, we're saying one thing and kind of putting something else into the motion. We're
think
saying
we
we're
might
leaving it
wanna
up to the Board of Commissioners, but then
separate that
in the
part out.
motion, we're saying don't waive it.
No, I'm saying I recommend that we don't waive the fee. The applicant will go next week to the Board of Commissioners, or when it's on the docket, and ask the Board of Commissioners to waive it, even though the Planning Commission may have voted to
but
not waive it.
I'm sorry, when we make a recommendation, we're recommending to them that they don't waive the fee. That's
Yeah,
what
so-
we're saying.
So
And we don't wanna
I'm
do
not
that. I
comfortable
want to defer
making that
to them.
recommendation.
Okay,
I'd
that's
rather
how
let
you
them.
want it. You prefer that we defer to them.
I would prefer, we defer to them.
Yeah.
Okay,
we'll
then
leave
I'll
the-
withdraw my motion, and somebody
Okay.
should do that.
Okay, would anyone like to make another motion?
So what you'd like to say is that we're going to, as to the fee in lieu or the dedication of open space, that we have heard the issue, but we defer to the commissioners on that. We're not recommending or opposing.
Well, I'll tell you the reason I recommended not waiving it is that staff recommended that. If we want to just still defer to the Board of Commissioners, we should write the motion that way.
See, I think
Well, how do you all
the ordinance is the way it is. It's sort of like if there's a fee, there's an escrow, there's a $10,000 escrow. They could ask us to waive that. We don't have any particular right to do that. I think council has pointed out that maybe the ordinance is ambiguous from his standpoint as to this application. But that's Peter would be able to give us a better opinion if it's ambiguous or not. And I don't think we should be waiving fees at all or suggesting that a fee be waived.
May I make one comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I think the way the ordinance goes is that you can either provide the recreational facilities or pay a fee in lieu. We're really taking the position that we're providing these recreational facilities. It's inherent in our property and in the use of our property, so that we are fulfilling the purpose of this recreational provision of the code. We're really not asking for a waiver of it. We're saying that we are meeting it by our very use of the property. So we do have a unique situation, and I think you made an excellent point on certain buildings. If there are non-residential buildings, commercial buildings that do go in that are going to draw people to them, we're really not drawing anybody to the club here. We have existing golf carts. We're converting them to electric. We need to put them in a building. So we're really not doing anything that would increase the use. So under the unique circumstances, we are hoping to have the Board of Commissioners recognize that we are meeting the purposes of the recreational ordinance by our very use.
Thank you. I think, in my opinion, at this point, I'd be very comfortable going with Susan's motion, knowing that at the next step, they're going to be talking to the Board of Commissioners, and we all agree that's where that decision needs to be made. I mean, this is a unique situation, and it's going to come up, and I think they should handle that.
I guess my question is, do they have a request for a waiver? Or if there's not even a request for a waiver, we shouldn't even be denying that request because they're not
I don't
requesting
think we're
it.
trying to deny the request. All we're saying is we're not going to, that's an interpretation of a piece of legislation. They're the legislators. Let them figure out how they want to implement it, if at all.
What
We're
you're
not
s-
taking a position, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, one way or the other.
But if we're not taking a position, why would we be including that in our motion? I'm confused. Our motion doesn't match what we're
Our
saying.
motion is just, they have brought it to our attention. We're now going to say, fine, thank you for bringing it to our attention. We suggest that you take that up with the commissioners.
But
John,
John, that's
John,
not
that's
what
not
the
what I
motion
said.
says.
That,
But
yeah.
that's what you would like to
That's
see.
what I think most of us are saying, but that's not what's in the motion. So I guess in that case, I wouldn't support that motion.
Regina, the reason why it's being discussed is Roger brought it up in his letter. The applicant has addressed it. The applicant has made the argument that we have met this requirement. Roger raised it that they need to provide a fee in lieu of. They're saying we don't because we meet it. I think a motion is proper to include a recommendation on whether or not they need to provide a fee in lieu of, they need to provide land, or if you agree with what the applicant says, that they meet it. And going back to Skip's question, the ordinance is unambiguous, and in my opinion, they clearly do not meet it.
And Mr. Fromhold, don't take it personally. This might be our first application where this has ever come up, so we're flushing this out for the first time because it's a pretty new ordinance that we proposed maybe in 2013. So I just, it's new for all of us as well.
Yeah, thank you, and I understand that. And I don't know that Roger said that we need to provide a fee in lieu. I'm reading his letter, and he says the project is subject to 255-43.1, which we concede. It's a non-residential development. He says requiring non-residential subdivisions or land development plans regulated under this section to provide suitable and adequate recreation land and/or fees. So I think he's recognizing we either need to provide the land and/or a fee. And we're really taking the position that we are providing the land, we are providing the recreation use. Indeed, our entire property is a recreational use. So I think he does say it's an and/or situation. And what he does note is that if there is a fee in lieu, he indicates what that fee would be. So I think the question is whether that fee is due or whether we are meeting this ordinance by our very use of the property.
And if I may add, what's being asked of you as a board is whether or not you will grant or recommend the waiving of land development on this. If you do that, this goes away. What staff is recommending is you can waive the land development process, but do not waive this item of the land development process. Make that a condition of that waiver that is issued.
So it's not
and
necessarily
then it goes to
that
the commissioners.
It's not necessarily that they'll have to pay the fee. It will have to be determined, are they providing the recreational land, or do they need to provide the fee? That's.
I'm fine with that.
So I think the wording just has to be a little bit different, is that it would still be subject to 255-43.1. That's what we're not saying.
I said,
well,
I
thought
recommended not granting a waiver for this.
But they didn't request a waiver.
There's been
They requested a waiver to everything, Regina.
They've requested a waiver to everything by asking for a waiver of the
I
land
see what you're
development
saying.
process.
Oh, because it's part of that
It's one
waiver. I thought you were
waiver,
saying they
and
had
we
a
want that little
separate,
piece of
okay,
it.
I got
That's
it
right.
now. Now it makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, we're all on board? Yep. Can we get a second to Ms. Stern's motion? Regina seconds. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I recommend that I'm making a motion that we recommend granting the waiver for the land development process. However, we specifically exclude waiving 255-43.1, which is the dedication of recreational land or fee in lieu of.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
Okay, 3 people seconded, so that was good. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good evening. Our next meeting will be on the 19th, which will be CIDC. Is there anything else likely to be on that agenda?
At this point, no. We only advertised specifically for that agenda item.
Great, thank you. So we'll see you all next week.